Hello. Welcome to Louisiana's Hurricane Delta. I don't know if you can hear the rain falling, but it's really loud here. I can only hear the rain falling. I don't know that you can see the rain falling, but where the gutters, it's really draining. See if that looks like rain. Thankfully, I think we're going to not get much of the bad part of it so far. Internet and electricity are holding out. But be thoughtful of those that are down in Lake Charles, Louisiana. If you're from Louisiana, you know where it is. If you don't know where Lake Charles is, it's very close to the Texas border. They just got wiped out. Hey, Toes Daddy. They just got wiped out about 6 weeks ago. And they're all like, they were just getting roofs put back on. They had just gotten electricity back on. But they're going through it again. So, it's starting to make landfall here in Louisiana. So it's like you're in live reporting. Cool up Pazan and friends. Cool up Pazan. I don't know how to say your name. I'm sorry. Bye to you. All right. So I am going to be out of pocket over the next 4 days. I'm really loving Pride and Prejudice. I loved it when I was young. I'm loving rereading it, rediscovering it. So even though I've got a bazillion things to do today, I wanted to stop and read because I know I won't be able to over the weekend or Monday or Tuesday. Siddharth, I'm coming to Atlanta. So don't judge me for traveling, but it was my birthday present to me. So, Daddy, you helped me pass English with your reading of the one about, the Crucible, the Salem witch trials. Yeah, I liked that one. That play is great. I'm glad you got a good grade. You could have done it on your own, but I'm glad to hear I helped. So Roman numeral 7, chapter 7, let's read. Mr. Bennet's property consisted almost entirely in an estate of $2,000 a year, which unfortunately for his daughters was entailed in default of heirs male on a distant relation, and with their mother's fortune, though ample for her situation in life, could but ill supply the deficiency of his. Her father had been an attorney in Meryton and had left her £4,000. So, Cools and friends, sweet back. So, those of you that are from England reading along, this will be like, why is she explaining this? But our inheritance laws are very different here, and I believe they're different now in England. But at the time of this writing, I think there were ways for female relatives to inherit, but I don't know it all. But basically, the way the law was, a female couldn't inherit her father's land. So Mr. Bennet has all these daughters. So upon his death, his daughters are not going to inherit the land. Some distant cousin, male cousin, is going to get it. And so finances are a really big deal to Miss Bennet. If Mr. Bennet dies while the family is still, the children are unmarried and still young, they're screwed, so to speak. They lose their home and they don't have an income. So come on, feminists, what do we think about that? She had a sister married to a Mr. Phillips, who had been a clerk to their father and succeeded him in the business, and a brother settled in London in a respectable line of trade. The village of Longbourn was only 1 mile from Meryton, a most convenient distance for the young ladies, who were usually tempted thither 3 or 4 times. Thither is there. I love that word, thither. 3 or 4 times a week to pay their duty to their aunt and to a milliner's shop just over the way. The 2 youngest of the family, Catherine and Lydia, were particularly frequent in these attentions. Their minds were more vacant than their sisters', and when nothing better offered, a walk to Meryton was necessary to amuse their morning hours and furnish conversation for the evening. And however bare of news the country in general might be, they always contrived to learn some from their aunts. At present, indeed, they were well supplied both with news and happiness by the recent arrival of a militia regiment in the neighborhood. So all these male soldiers are there. Hey, D. Lamar, I haven't heard from you in a while. D. Lamar, we've really got a cracking discourse going on, and you need to check out like the last version of Pride and Prejudice. There's a link to it. Come in and join us, even if you can only pop in every now and then and say hi. We keep some good discussions going on. I'd love for you to be there. Um, so now we've got the military is in, and all these single girls are going to find single males. Their visits to Mrs. Phillips were now productive of the most interesting intelligence like news. Every day added something to their knowledge of the officers' names and connections. Their lodgings were not long a secret, and at length they began to know the officers themselves. Mr. Phillips visited them all, and this opened to his nieces a source of felicity unknown before. They could talk of nothing but officers, and Mr. Bingley's large fortune, the mention of which gave animation to their mother, was worthless in their eyes when opposed to the regimentals of an ensign. So what she would have considered to be an eligible bachelor before, compared to Bingley, they don't have the wealth, and he's going to always be the first choice. After listening one morning to their effusions on this subject, Mr. Bennet coolly observed, "From all that I can collect by your manner of talking, you must be two of the silliest girls in the country. I have suspected it some time, but I am now convinced." Catherine was disconcerted and made no answer, but Lydia, with perfect indifference, continued to express her admiration of Captain Carter and her hope of seeing him in the course of the day, as he was going the next morning to London. "I'm astonished, my dear," said Mrs. Bennet, "that you should be so ready to think your own children silly. If I wish to think slightingly of anybody's children, it should not be my own, however." Hi, Haley. Glad you're back. Let me get some water. This time I had it handy. When they get to our age, I dare say they will not think about officers any more than we do. I remember the time when I liked a red coat myself very well. The red coat is, hey, Sidhard. The red coat was the color of the military of the British Army or British military. A red coat myself very well, and indeed so I do still at my heart. And if a smart young colonel with 5,000 or 6,000 a year should want one of my girls, I shall not say nay to him. And I thought Colonel Forster looked very becoming the other night at Sir William's in his regimentals. "Mamma," cried Lydia, "my aunt says that Colonel Forster and Captain Carter do not go so often to Miss Watson's as they did when they first came. She sees him now very often standing in Clark's libraries." Mrs. Bennet was preventing replying by the entrance of the footman with a note for Miss Bennet. So this footman has come in with a note to deliver, like the mail. It came from Netherfield, and the servant waited for an answer. Mrs. Bennet's eyes sparkled with pleasure, and she was eagerly calling out while her daughter read. "Well, Jane, who is it from? What is it about? What does he say? Well, Jane, make haste and tell us. Make haste, my love." "It is from Miss Bingley," said Jane, and then read it aloud. "My dear friend, if you are not so compassionate as to dine today with Louisa and me, we shall be in danger of hating each other for the rest of our lives. For a whole day's tete-a-tete, head-to-head, between two women can never end without a quarrel. Come, like there's just the two of us, and we're going to fight. Please show up and have dinner with us. Come as soon as you can on the receipt of this. My brother and the gentlemen are to dine with the officers. Yours ever, Caroline Bingley." "With the officers," cried Lydia. "I wonder my aunt did not tell us that." "Dining out," said Mrs. Bennet. "That is very unlucky." "Can I have the carriage?" said Jane. "No, my dear, you had better go on horseback because it seems likely to rain, and then you must stay all night." "That would be a good scheme," said Elizabeth, "if you were sure they would not offer to send her home." So the mother's like scheming how to get her daughter invited to stay as an overnight guest. So if she's on a horse and it rains, they're not going to make her ride home in the rain. If she goes in a carriage, she doesn't have an excuse to stay. But Elizabeth said, but they might let us use their carriage. That scheme may not work. Aiden Rots, "Hey, I've been listening to your separate piece. Amazing, Mal. Thank you. I'm glad to help you." "What? Chapter 10 of what?" said Hart. "Of this? What are you doing reading ahead?" said Hart. Act 1, the Crucible last night. I was completely blown away by everything that happened. I don't remember where Act 1 ends. It's that's been at least a year since I read that one, and so I don't know about the act. I don't know so I don't want to do spoilers. So you have to help me know, is that the confession of Tituba, where she gets down and starts confessing and naming names? Really, I just don't remember. I have a terrible memory. Do you see the clouds when I don't know if you can tell. Can you see the clouds kind of, the sky is gray. It's not that late here. It's only 6. So, no, it's a good play. It really is. Goes into the human soul. Unlike these fluffy girls that are just plotting a way to figure out their society and make a life for themselves. Yeah, Confessions of Tituba. And yeah, after that, Abigail. The ultimate original mean girl. Oh, look at my little horn. Speaking of the Crucible and Abigail, in honor of her. Oh, but the gentlemen will have Mr. Bingley's chaise to go to Meryton, and the Hursts have no horses to theirs. I had much rather go in the coach. But, my dear, your father cannot spare the horses, I'm sure. They are wanted in the farm. Mr. Bennet, are they not? They are wanted in the farm much oftener than I can get them. But if you've got them today, said Elizabeth, my mother's purpose will be answered. She did at last extort from her father an acknowledgment that the horses were engaged. Jane was, therefore, obliged to go on horseback, and her mother attended her to the door with many cheerful prognostics of a bad day. Her hopes were answered. Jane had not gone long before it rained hard. Her sisters were uneasy for her, but her mother was delighted. The rain continued the whole evening without intermission. Jane certainly could not come back. This was a lucky idea of mine indeed, said Mrs. Bennet more than once, as if the credit of making it rain were all her own. Till the next morning, however, she was not aware of all the felicity of her contrivance. Breakfast was scarcely over when the servant from Netherfield dropped the following note for Elizabeth. Act 3 is your favorite. Sayan Abdo. Well, thank you. I probably love you too, but I don't know you. So I'm a little reserved, but thank you for liking the work I do. Haley, it's very dramatic. And the line about my name, Siddharth, did you like that part? Give me my name. You can have my soul, but give me my name. That just gets me. He's so powerful. And he, I think there's a lot in there about owning your own indiscretions and your own frailties and shortcomings. And it's complex because of that. It would be a really great thing for us to discuss in Discord. I would really like to get into his character a lot more. Like, is he a good guy or is he a bad guy? Or is he just a guy? So remind me that we need to get a Crucible channel going in Discord. We were really chatting yesterday. I was excited about that. So here's the note. My dearest Lizzie, I find myself very unwell this morning, which I suppose is to be imputed to my getting wet through yesterday. My kind friends will not hear of my returning home till I am better. They insist also on seeing Mr. Jones. Therefore, do not be alarmed if you should hear of his having been to me. I guess he's the doctor. And excepting a sore throat and headache, there's not much the matter with me. Yours, etc. Well, my dear, said Mr. Bennet, when Elizabeth had read the note aloud, if your daughter should have a dangerous fit of illness, if she should die, it would be a comfort to know that it was all in pursuit of Mr. Bingley and under your orders. And in other words, very passive aggressively, he said, you got your kid sick. If she dies, it's on you. The actor who plays John in the movie is Arthur Miller's son-in-law. In the most modern movie, that was somebody well known. I didn't know that. That's a good fact. Henderson, Kite Runner. Put the name, because wasn't that the one with Winona Ryder? So I'm trying to think who the 1994 movie. Okay, I don't know I'd have to look later if that's the Winona Ryder version. But I didn't know that. Arthur Miller was married to Marilyn Monroe. Do you guys know that? Do you know who Marilyn Monroe is? Yeah, that's the version I really like. I think that version is the closest to the play. And she is in the 1996 movie. I never understood why they released two so close together. But I think Marilyn Monroe should have been Abigail. She would have been a good Abigail, probably. Okay, keep going. Now the rain has stopped, so you should hear me better. Oh, I'm not at all afraid of her dying. My nose always itches when I read. I think that's because we say people are thinking about you, so don't stop thinking about me. It always is just the end of my nose. She will take good care of. She will be taken good care of as long as she stays there. It is all very well. I would go and see her if I could have the carriage. Elizabeth, feeling really anxious, was determined to go to her, though the carriage was not to be had. And as she was no horsewoman, walking was her only alternative. She declared her resolution. How can you be so silly, cried her mother, as to think of such a thing in all this dirt? You will not be fit to be seen when you get there. I shall be very fit to see Jane, which is all I want. Is this a hint to me, Lizzie, said her father, to send for the horses? No, indeed, I do not wish to avoid the walk. The distance is nothing when one has a motive. Only 3 miles. I will be back by dinner. I admire the activity of your benevolence, observed Mary, but every impulse of feeling should be guided by reason, and in my opinion, exertion should also be in proportion to what is required. We will go as far as Meryton. Oh, my nose is just like tickle itching. Not inside. I just don't want y'all to think I'm in here picking my nose. It's on the outside. We will go as far as Meryton with you, said Catherine and Lydia. Elizabeth accepted their company, and the 3 young ladies set off together. If we make haste, said Lydia as they walked along, perhaps we may see something of Captain Carter before he goes. Oh, the girls' motive. They want to get there and see the other men. In Meryton they parted. The 2 youngest repaired to the lodgings of one of the officers' wives, and Elizabeth continued her walk alone, crossing field after field at a quick pace, jumping over stiles and springing over puddles with impatient activity, and finding herself at last within view of the house, with weary ankles, dirty stockings, and a face glowing with the warmth of exercise. She was shown into the breakfast parlor, where all but Jane were assembled, and where her appearance created a great deal of surprise. That she should have walked 3 miles so early in the day in such dirty weather and by herself was almost incredible to Mrs. Hurst and Miss Bingley, and Elizabeth was convinced that they held her in contempt for it. She was received, however, very politely by them, and in their brother's manners there was something better than politeness. There was good humor and kindness. Mr. Darcy said very little, and Mr. Hurst nothing at all. The former was divided between admiration of the brilliancy which exercise had given her to her complexion, and doubt as to the occasions justifying her coming so far alone. The latter was thinking only of his breakfast. Arthur Miller, was married. That I know. I love throwing out a little bit of knowing some scoop that normally I never know the scoop. So I get excited when I can tell y'all something, a tidbit that you didn't know. And I didn't Google that. I just knew that. Her inquiries after her sister were not very favorably answered. Miss Bennet had slept ill. Oh, I want to stop for a minute. Siddharth, I have a task for you. This book in this version goes to 368, and I'm on page 30. So what do you think? Have I put enough in to figure an average of what we'll read? How many episodes will it take to get through the book? See, we're 20 minutes in, and depending on how long 8 is, I'll probably average 2 chapters per read. Well, that we could just do by chapters. So how many chapters are there? Oh, shoot. LXI 11. Is that 61? LXI? Isn't that 50? X10, I1. So 61. Somebody help me. I really, Roman numerals past X's always mess me up. That's interesting, Haley, because we're supposed to like her. And what is it? That's a great topic for school when you talk about characterization. What have we learned so far about her? How has the author made her sympathetic to us? Why do we like her? She's a good sister. She's not jealous of her older sister. She's playful with her mom, but loves her. She's her father's favorite. She's outspoken and independent. She wasn't like, oh, I don't want to get dirty. She's like, I've got to go check on my sister. So she's loyal. So we end up knowing a lot of things about her that has been placed in our minds by a very crafted writer in Austen. And that's all known as characterization, building the reader's like or dislike, trust or distrust of a character by very well-placed words, direct characterization, or circumstances, indirect characterization. So it never says directly, Austen never says, Elizabeth is a woman of great character. We never hear that directly, but we begin to put that together. And that's when readers, when you find yourself liking or feeling sympathetic toward a character, that's something you can look for your essays. Make a note of it when you annotate, because that's the kind of thing teachers are looking for. That's that characterization. What did the author do or say with that character that made you like them? Siddharth, I'll see you on Discord, and be careful, be safe, and I probably won't read until I get back. So it'll probably be Wednesday or so before I read again. It may be a full week. I don't know how busy I'll be at work. So thanks for being here. You can always find me at Discord or Instagram. So where are we? Her inquiries after her sister were not favorably answered. Miss Bennet had slept ill, and though up, was very feverish and not well enough to leave her room. Elizabeth was glad to be taken to her immediately, and Jane, who had only been withheld by the fear of giving alarm or inconvenience from expressing in her note how much she longed for such a visit, was delighted at her entrance. She was not equal, however, to much conversation, so she really is sick. Too much conversation. I lost there. And when Miss Bingley left them together, could attempt little beside expressions of gratitude for the extraordinary kindness she was treated with. Elizabeth silently attended her. When breakfast was over, they were joined by the sisters, and Elizabeth began to like them herself. When she saw how some affection and solicitude they showed for Jane, the apothecary, the pharmacist, came, and having examined his patient, said it might be supposed that she had caught a violent cold, and that they must endeavor to get the better of it, advised her to return to bed, and promised her some draughts. The advice was followed readily, for the feverish symptoms increased, and her head ached acutely. I have to stop on this word endeavor. I always use that as my guiding word as an English teacher. It was on my bulletin board, and if some of my old students ever come stumbling on and reading this, they'll know that was our key word. And I always wondered why endeavor was a word that I had, and I realized it's such a part of Victorian writing, which is what I love to read as a young person. So it strongly influenced me. So when I see that there, endeavor just means try your best, make an effort. But I was trying to teach kids bigger words than try, so substitute for endeavor. And so I wanted them to endeavor, and I wanted them to endeavor to improve their vocabulary. So it had a double use. So, and that's where it came from, me reading all these books as a young woman. Siddharth, you and Haley are both so nice. I appreciate y'all. So she's endeavoring. The advice was followed readily, for the feverish symptoms increased, and her head ached acutely. Elizabeth did not quit her room for a moment, nor were the other ladies often absent. The gentlemen being out, they had in fact nothing to do elsewhere. When the clock struck 3, Elizabeth felt that she must go, and very unwillingly said so. Miss Bingley offered her the carriage, and she only wanted a little pressing to accept it. When Jane testified such concern in parting with her that Miss Bingley was obliged to convert the offer of the chaise into an invitation to remain at Netherfield for the present, Elizabeth most thankfully consented, and a servant was dispatched to Longbourn to acquaint the family with her stay and bring back a supply of clothes. All right, so I'm going to stop there because that's 24 minutes. So these readings will be shorter, but we're working through. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Um, those of you that are in the path of Delta, I send my prayers and best wishes to you. Those of you that are in the path of coronavirus, the same. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Subscribe, not as important. Ring the bell, send me messages, like. We're at 9,700 subscribers, so we're getting close to 10,000. Keep telling your friends about it. Bye, D. Lamar. Good to see you again. If I'm not mistaken, you're over in Texas, so hopefully you're not getting any of this bad weather. And I will read to you next time. See ya.